They say you never truly know someone until you see them at their worst. I used to think that was just another one of those tired cliches people tossed around to sound wise. After all, I'd been with Rebecca for 12 years, married for 8 of them. We'd weathered storms together, my father's death, her mother's cancer scare, financial struggles when my business nearly went under, even a miscarriage that left us both hollow for months. If those weren't worst moments, what were they? I was so certain I knew every facet of my wife. The way she'd scrunch her nose when concentrating on a crossword puzzle. How she'd always order Thai food when stressed but claim she wasn't hungry. The little scar on her left knee from a childhood bicycle accident. Her irrational fear of ceiling fans. The soft humming she'd do while folding laundry. Always the same melody from some half-remembered lullaby. But knowing someone's quirks, their history, their daily patterns, that's not the same as truly knowing them. Not really. Because beneath all those surface details, beneath the shared mortgage and the joint checking account and the framed wedding photos on the mantle, there can exist an entirely separate person, a stranger wearing a familiar face. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and I'm a 41-year-old civil engineer living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Or at least, I was living what I thought was a perfectly ordinary, reasonably happy life in Charlotte. I had a wife who kissed me goodbye each morning, 2 kids who complained about homework and begged for later bedtimes, a 3-bedroom house with a mortgage that would be paid off in 15 years, and a golden retriever named Biscuit who thought every visitor was a long-lost friend. The American dream, right? The whole package wrapped up with a neat bow. Except the bow was already unraveling, and I was too blind to see it. Looking back now, I can identify the signs. They were there, scattered like breadcrumbs through our daily life, but I was too trusting, too comfortable, too naive to pick them up and follow where they led. The late-night texts she'd quickly minimize when I walked into the room. The new attention to her appearance, fresh highlights, a gym membership she actually used, clothes that seemed more daring than her usual style. The way she'd started working late on Thursdays, always Thursdays, with explanations that grew increasingly vague. But I trusted her. God help me, I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. Not because trust itself is wrong, it's the foundation of any marriage, but because I'd confused trust with willful blindness. I'd stopped paying attention, stopped asking questions, stopped being curious about her inner world because I assumed I already had the map. My second mistake was believing that our marriage was immune to the statistics. We weren't like those other couples, the ones who grew apart or fell into affairs. We had something solid, something real. We'd built a life together, brick by brick. We had history. We had children. We had investment in each other. What I didn't understand then, what I learned in the most brutal way possible, is that none of that matters when someone decides to step outside the bounds of their vows. History doesn't protect you. Children don't protect you. Investment doesn't protect you. When someone wants to betray you, they'll find a way to justify it, to compartmentalize it, to convince themselves that what they're doing isn't really that bad. And they'll get very, very good at lying. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. The kids, Emma, 10, and Tyler, 7, were arguing over the bathroom while I made pancakes, burning the first batch as usual. Rebecca came downstairs already dressed for work, her dark hair pulled back in that professional bun she favored, wearing a navy blazer I'd bought her for her birthday. "You're going to be late," she said, kissing my cheek while grabbing her travel mug of coffee. The kiss was brief, perfunctory, the kind of gesture that had become muscle memory rather than affection. "Parent-teacher conferences tonight," I reminded her. "Emma's is at 6, Tyler's at 6:30. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance? Guilt? It was gone before I could identify it. "I forgot to put it in my calendar," she said, pulling out her phone. "I have a meeting with a client that might run late. Can you handle it?" "Again?" The word came out sharper than I intended. That's the third school thing you've missed this month. My job is important too, Daniel. Her tone had that edge it had been developing lately, that defensive brittleness. We can't all have flexible schedules. I bit back my response. My schedule wasn't flexible. I just made the kids a priority. But starting an argument before 8 in the morning seemed pointless. Fine, I said. I'll take notes for you. She was already halfway to the door, her mind clearly elsewhere. You're the best. Love you. The words sounded hollow, automatic, like she was reading from a script she'd long since memorized. I didn't say them back. She didn't seem to notice. After she left, I got the kids fed, packed their lunches, signed the permission slip Tyler had forgotten to show me until that morning, and drove them to Riverside Elementary. The morning routine was so familiar I could have done it in my sleep, which was good, because I was operating on about 5 hours of rest. The drive to my office took 43 minutes that morning. I remember because I counted every single one, watching the dashboard clock tick forward while I sat in traffic on I-77, surrounded by other people living their ordinary lives. People who probably weren't questioning whether their entire marriage was built on sand. I tried to focus on work. God knows I tried. There was a drainage system redesign for a new commercial development in Huntersville that needed my attention. Deadlines, permits, the usual engineering puzzles that normally absorbed me completely. But I found myself staring at the same CAD drawing for 20 minutes, seeing nothing but Rebecca's face that morning. The way she'd applied her lipstick with such care. The way she'd checked her phone 3 times during breakfast. The way she hadn't noticed when I didn't say I loved her back. My phone buzzed around 11. A text from Rebecca. Don't forget I have class tonight. Won't be home until late. Class? Right. The medical school program she'd mentioned starting back in August. Part-time, she'd said. Something about fulfilling a lifelong dream, going back to pursue what she'd always wanted before life got in the way. I'd been supportive, proud even. My wife juggling motherhood and a career and now medical school. Ambitious. Driven. Looking at that text, though, something nagged at me. A splinter working its way deeper into my thoughts. I pulled up our text history, scrolling back through weeks of messages. There, August 15th. Her announcement about the program. Got accepted to that medical program I applied for. Part-time, mostly evening classes. Starts next month. I know it's a lot, but I really want to do this. My response, that's amazing. So proud of you. We'll make it work. I'd asked a few follow-up questions over the following days. Which school? She'd been vague. Some newer institution, she'd said, focused on non-traditional students. Where was it located? South Charlotte, convenient to her office. How long was the program? 2 years for the initial certification, then she could decide about continuing. I remembered feeling slightly confused about the details. Medical school was medical school, wasn't it? 4 years, then residency. But she'd explained it was a different kind of program, more specialized, and I'd nodded along because I trusted her. Because I didn't know anything about medical education. Because she was my wife, and why would she lie? Sitting in my office that Tuesday morning, I opened a new browser window. The search was simple. Medical schools, Charlotte, NC. UNC Charlotte didn't have a medical school. I knew that. The closest actual medical schools were in Chapel Hill or Winston-Salem. But maybe there were newer programs, satellite campuses, something I didn't know about. I spent the next hour searching. Online programs, nursing schools, physician assistant programs, continuing education for medical professionals. Nothing matched what Rebecca had described. Nothing that would have evening classes for someone with no prior medical background starting a path to becoming a doctor. The splinter dug deeper. I called her office. Melody answered, Rebecca's assistant, cheerful and efficient. Hey Melody, it's Daniel. Is Rebecca available? Oh, hi, Mr. Whitmore. No, she's out at a client meeting this morning. Should be back after lunch. Want me to have her call you? No, that's okay. Quick question, though. Has she mentioned her medical school classes to you? I'm trying to remember which evenings she has them. A pause. Brief, but noticeable. Medical school? No, she hasn't mentioned anything like that to me. But you know Rebecca, she keeps her cards pretty close. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. Just slightly, but enough that I had to set my coffee mug down before I spilled it across my keyboard. I pulled up our bank statements. We had separate accounts for our personal spending, but a joint account for household expenses. Rebecca managed most of the finances. She was better with numbers in that practical, day-to-day way, while I dealt with the theoretical mathematics of load-bearing calculations and water flow rates. There. September 12th. A payment to something called Carolina Professional Institute. $2,400. Then another on October 10th. Another $2,400. I searched for Carolina Professional Institute. The website looked professional enough at first glance. Stock photos of diverse students in white coats, smiling at microscopes, testimonials about flexible scheduling for working professionals, and accelerated paths to medical careers. But as I dug deeper, something felt off. The address listed was on Westinghouse Boulevard, in a part of South Charlotte I knew reasonably well. I pulled up Google Maps and switched to Street View. The address was a strip mall, between a nail salon and a tax preparation service that advertised year-round returns. I sat back in my chair, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. Maybe it was just their administrative office. Maybe they held classes somewhere else. Maybe, but I already knew. The way you know things in your gut before your brain catches up. The same way I'd known something was wrong for weeks but had been too afraid to look directly at it. I grabbed my jacket. Taking an early lunch, I told my project manager on the way out. He barely looked up from his own screen. The drive to Westinghouse Boulevard took 35 minutes. I parked across the street from the address, in front of a Goodwill donation center, and stared at the strip mall. Carolina Professional Institute occupied a narrow storefront with tinted windows. A small sign hung above the door. Professional lettering, nothing obviously fraudulent. Next door, women sat in massage chairs getting pedicures. On the other side, someone had taped a sign about tax extensions. I watched for 20 minutes. No one went in or out of the supposed medical school. No students carrying textbooks. No professors with briefcases. Nothing. My phone buzzed. Rebecca. What do you want for dinner tomorrow? Thinking of trying that new crock-pot recipe. The mundane domesticity of it made my stomach turn. I didn't respond. At 12:47, a man emerged from the Carolina Professional Institute, mid-40s, good-looking in that polished way some men achieve, expensive haircut, fitted suit, confident stride. He locked the door behind him, checked his phone, and walked to a silver Lexus parked 3 spaces down. I took a photo of his license plate. I'm not sure why. Instinct, maybe. The engineer in me, documenting data. He drove away and the strip mall returned to its sleepy afternoon routine. A woman carried dry cleaning into her car. Someone's brake lights flashed. Ordinary life continuing. I sat there until 2:15, then drove back to my office. I accomplished nothing for the rest of the day. Just stared at drainage calculations and thought about my wife attending medical school in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax service. That evening, I was home before the kids got off the bus. I made them snacks, apple slices and peanut butter for Emma, string cheese and crackers for Tyler. I asked about their days. I helped with homework. I played the role of present father while my mind spun in circles. Rebecca came home at 6:30, kissed the kids, scratched Biscuit behind the ears. "How was your day?" she asked me. The same question she asked every evening. "Fine," I said. "Yours?" "Exhausting." Client meeting ran long, then back-to-back calls all afternoon. She set her bag down, kicked off her heels. I need to eat something quick before class. What time is it? 6:35. Okay, I need to leave by 7:15. She moved around the kitchen, assembling a salad, checking her phone. Normal. Everything so perfectly, terribly normal. Where's the school again? I asked casually, not looking up from the permission slip I was signing for Tyler's field trip. South Charlotte, off Westinghouse. She didn't even hesitate. Why? Just curious. I realized I don't actually know much about the program. She glanced at me then, something flickering across her face. It's pretty specialized. Probably boring if you're not into medical stuff. Try me. Daniel, I really need to eat and get ready. What are you studying tonight? Another flicker. Anatomy. We're covering the cardiovascular system. I nodded, smiled. That's great, honey. She left at 7:18, wearing those dark jeans that were newer, tighter. A silk blouse I didn't recognize. Her good perfume. After the kids were in bed, I sat in my home office and searched for information about fake medical schools, diploma mills, credential fraud. The rabbit hole went deeper than I'd imagined. I spent the next 3 days moving through my life like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. I kissed Rebecca goodbye in the mornings, her lips cool against mine. I helped Tyler find his misplaced homework. I listened to Emma practice her violin, the screeching notes matching the discord in my chest. And all the while, I felt like I was watching someone else perform these mundane rituals, someone who still believed in the reality of his marriage. The Carolina Professional Institute. The name kept circling through my mind like a vulture. On Wednesday evening, I made my decision. If Rebecca could enroll in a fake medical school, so could I. The website was surprisingly professional, which I suppose was the entire point. Clean design, stock photos of attractive people in white coats examining anatomical models, testimonials from graduates who'd transformed their careers. The course offerings ranged from accelerated medical degree programs to advanced surgical certifications to something called executive healthcare leadership credentials. All available part-time. All remarkably affordable compared to legitimate institutions. All completely worthless. I filled out the online inquiry form using my work email. Within 2 hours, I received a response from someone named Dr. Philip Grayson, Director of Admissions. The email was warm, congratulatory, and invited me to attend an orientation session this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. Saturday. Rebecca's usual study group day. I confirmed my attendance, then sat back in my office chair, staring at the ceiling. The plan forming in my mind was reckless, probably stupid, and definitely not something the old Daniel Whitmore would have considered. But the old Daniel Whitmore had believed his wife when she said she was studying cardiovascular anatomy. The old Daniel Whitmore was an idiot. Thursday night, Rebecca came home at 9:47 p.m. I'd been tracking the time, watching the minutes accumulate like evidence. She looked flushed, energized in a way that made my stomach turn. "How was class?" I asked from the couch, where I'd been pretending to watch a documentary about bridge construction. "Exhausting." She dropped her bag by the stairs, a leather tote I didn't recognize. "We spent 3 hours on renal physiology. My brain feels like mush." "Sounds intense." "You have no idea." She kicked off her heels, also new I noticed, black stilettos with red soles. "I'm going to take a shower and crash." I waited until I heard the water running upstairs, then moved to her bag. My hands were shaking. This was a line I'd never crossed before, this invasion of privacy. But then again, I'd never had a wife attending a fake medical school before either. Inside the bag, a makeup case with expensive brands I didn't recognize, a bottle of perfume, breath mints, and a novel. Some thriller about a woman who disappears. No medical textbooks. No notebooks filled with lecture notes. No anatomy flashcards, but there was a phone charger, and that struck me as odd, because Rebecca always kept one in her car. Unless she was charging her phone somewhere else. Somewhere she spent enough time to need a backup charger. I returned everything exactly as I'd found it and went back to the couch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the October sun burning off the early fog by 8 a.m. I told Rebecca I was meeting some guys from work to look at a construction site for a new bridge project outside the city. She barely looked up from her coffee. I'll probably be gone most of the day, I added. I've got my study group at 10. She scrolled through her phone, not meeting my eyes. Might grab dinner with some classmates afterward. Classmates, I repeated, testing the word. From the program. She finally glanced at me, her expression unreadable. We're forming a support network. Medical school is brutal, even part-time. I bet it is. Something flickered across her face. Suspicion, maybe, or guilt. But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. The strip mall looked even more depressing in daylight. The nail salon was doing brisk business, and the tax service had a "closed until January" sign in the window. The Carolina Professional Institute occupied the corner unit, its windows covered with partially closed blinds that prevented anyone from seeing inside clearly. I parked 3 spaces down from a silver BMW, the same one I'd seen on Monday. My pulse quickened. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space had been arranged to look vaguely academic. Folding tables arranged in rows, a podium at the front, anatomical posters on the walls that looked like they'd been ordered from Amazon. There were maybe a dozen people scattered around the room, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 50s. They all had the same hungry look, people searching for shortcuts, for credentials without the work, for the appearance of expertise without the expertise itself. And there, in the 3rd row, sat Rebecca. She was talking to a man beside her, the same well-dressed man I'd seen leaving on Monday. He had his hand on her arm, leaning in close to whisper something that made her laugh. The sound of it, bright and genuine in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months, hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the doorway, my carefully constructed plan evaporating. I'd imagined this moment, rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd maintain my composure. But seeing her there, seeing them together in this absurd theater of deception, rendered me mute. Then Rebecca turned, still smiling, and her eyes met mine. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The man beside her followed her gaze, his expression shifting from confusion to concern to something else. Calculation, maybe. Daniel. Rebecca's voice came out strangled. How did you? I found my voice, though it sounded distant to my own ears. I enrolled, in the medical program. I walked further into the room, aware that others were watching now, sensing drama. I thought it would be nice if we studied together. You know, as a couple. The man stood up, extending his hand with remarkable composure given the circumstances. I'm Dr. Philip Grayson. You must be Daniel. Your wife has told me so much about you. I stared at his outstretched hand but didn't take it. Doctor, I repeated. What medical school did you attend? His smile didn't waver. Johns Hopkins, class of 2003. That's interesting, because Johns Hopkins keeps very detailed alumni records, and I couldn't find any Philip Grayson in their database. I'd spent hours the night before, unable to sleep, running searches. I couldn't find you in any medical school database, actually, or in the North Carolina Medical Board's physician directory. The smile finally cracked. I think there's been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it, is thinking I'm stupid enough to fall for this. I gestured around the room. This isn't a medical school. It's a fraud. And you're not a doctor. You're a con artist. Rebecca grabbed my arm. Daniel, please. Let's talk outside. I shook her off. How long? I asked her. How long have you been lying to me? It's not what you think. Then what is it, Rebecca? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been pretending to attend medical school so you could spend time with this fraud. I turned back to Grayson. Does she know you're not really a doctor? Or is she part of the con? I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Grayson said, his voice hardening. You're disrupting our orientation. Orientation for what? How to commit credential fraud? How to impersonate medical professionals? I pulled out my phone. Because I've got the North Carolina Medical Board on speed dial now. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your operation here. That got his attention. His composure finally shattered, replaced by something uglier. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a diploma mill. You're selling fake medical credentials to people desperate enough or stupid enough to buy them. I looked at Rebecca. Which one are you? Her face crumpled. Daniel, I can explain. Then explain. Right here, right now. Tell me what the hell you've been doing. But before she could answer, Grayson moved toward the back of the room, toward a door I hadn't noticed before. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Philip, wait! He disappeared through the door. I heard the sound of another door opening and closing, then an engine starting. The BMW, I realized. He was running. The silence in that cramped office stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable, until Rebecca finally spoke. Daniel, She stopped, her mouth opening and closing like she was testing different words, discarding them before they could reach the air between us. This isn't what you think. I almost laughed. Almost. Really? Because what I think is that you've been lying to me for months. What I think is that you've been coming to a strip mall twice a week, paying thousands of dollars to a man who just ran out the back door. What I think is that our entire marriage has become a fiction I've been too stupid to question. She flinched at that last part, and something in me, some small, pathetic part, wanted to take it back. 12 years of conditioning, I suppose. 12 years of smoothing things over, of being the reasonable one, of giving her the benefit of the doubt. Sit down, I said, gesturing to one of the cheap plastic chairs, and tell me the truth. All of it. Rebecca sat, her designer purse. New, I noticed, probably $400 she'd spent while I was clipping coupons, clutched in her lap like a shield. I remained standing, my back against the door. If she wanted to leave, she'd have to go through me. I met Philip in June, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. At a conference in Raleigh, he was giving a presentation on alternative medicine certification programs. Was he wearing his fake medical degree then? Or does he save that for special occasions? I didn't know it was fake. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Fear, maybe, or shame. Daniel, I swear to God I thought it was legitimate. Why? The question came out harder than I intended. Why would you even want a medical degree? You work in pharmaceutical sales. You have a bachelor's in business. This makes no sense. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers worrying at the strap of her purse. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, younger somehow. Do you know what it's like to be 40 years old and realize you've made all the wrong choices? I'm 41, I said, and I thought I'd made the right ones. She ignored that. Every doctor I call on, every hospital I visit, they look at me like I'm just some sales rep, like I'm not worth their time. But if I had credentials, real medical knowledge, they'd have to respect me. They'd have to listen. So you paid a man you met at a conference $5,000 for a fake degree. I didn't know it was fake. Her voice rose, defensive now. He showed me accreditation documents, testimonials from other students. He said it was an accelerated program for working professionals, that it was approved by international medical boards. I thought about the glossy brochure I'd received, the professional website, the carefully constructed lie. When did you figure it out? She looked away. I don't know. Maybe, maybe I didn't want to know. The classes were online, pre-recorded lectures. There were no exams, no practical training, just assignments that got rubber-stamped with an A no matter what I submitted. Her voice cracked. But Philip kept saying it was normal for accelerated programs, that traditional medical schools were just gatekeeping. Philip? I tasted the name like poison. You're on a first-name basis with the man running this scam. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Rebecca? Because from where I'm standing, you've been sneaking off twice a week to meet a con artist in a strip mall, lying to me about medical school and spending money we don't have on a degree that doesn't exist. I know how it looks. Do you? I moved closer, and she pressed back in her chair. Do you know how it looks when your wife starts dressing differently, wearing new perfume, coming home late with stories about study groups that don't exist? Do you know what that does to a person? I wasn't having an affair. She said it quickly, desperately, like she could feel me slipping away. Daniel, I swear it was never about that. Philip he's just the instructor. I barely spoke to him outside of class. Class? I shook my head. You mean the orientation sessions in this office? The ones where he handed out fake syllabi and took your money? There were real classes, online, other students. Other marks, you mean? I pulled out my phone, the one I'd been recording on since I walked into this building. The North Carolina Medical Board is going to want to know about those other students. The Attorney General's office, too. This isn't just fraud, Rebecca. This is criminal. Her face went pale. You can't. Daniel, if this gets out, I'll lose my job. The pharmaceutical company does background checks. If they find out I was involved in a fake medical school, you were involved. You paid money, you attended classes, you put it on your LinkedIn profile. I'd checked that morning, seen the proud announcement, pursuing advanced medical education at Carolina Professional Institute. You told your boss, didn't you? That's why you got that promotion in September. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Jesus, Rebecca. I sat down hard in the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. You lied to your employer about fake credentials. That's not just embarrassing. That's a fireable offense, possibly prosecutable. I was trying to get ahead. Her voice broke completely now, tears streaming down her face. The same face I'd kissed goodbye that morning. The same face I'd loved for 12 years. I was trying to be more than just a sales rep with a quota. I wanted to matter. You mattered to me. Past tense. I heard it as soon as I said it, and so did she. Daniel, did you really think you could get away with this? That you could just show up with a fake medical degree and no one would question it? Philip said, "Stop." I held up my hand. Stop telling me what Philip said. Philip is a con artist who's probably done this a dozen times. He's probably in his car right now, heading to the next city, the next scam, the next group of desperate people willing to believe in shortcuts. She wiped at her eyes, mascara smearing across her cheeks. What are you going to do? I thought about Emma and Tyler, home with my mother, probably fighting over the remote. I thought about the mortgage payment due next week, the credit card bills Rebecca had been hiding, the $5,000 we'd never get back. I thought about trust and how easy it is to break and how impossible it is to rebuild. I'm going to report this to every relevant authority I can find, I said. The medical board, the attorney general, the Better Business Bureau, the accreditation agencies. I'm going to make sure Philip Grayson, if that's even his real name, never does this to anyone else. And me? Her voice was small, childlike. I stood up, looked down at this woman I barely recognized. You need to tell your employer the truth before they find out another way. You need to lawyer up, because there's probably going to be an investigation. And you need to figure out where you're going to stay, because I need time to think about whether our marriage can survive this. Daniel, please. I trusted you. The words came out flat, emotionless, which somehow made them worse. I trusted you completely. And you spent months lying to my face. You missed Emma's parent-teacher conference for this. You missed Tyler's soccer game. You looked me in the eye every Thursday morning and lied. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I'll pack a bag for you, I said. You can stay at your sister's. We'll figure out the rest later. I walked out of that office, out of the strip mall, into the bright October afternoon. Behind me, I could hear Rebecca crying, but I didn't turn around. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed with apologies. The house felt different after Rebecca left that Saturday afternoon. Not emptier, that would come later, but somehow exposed, like a wound before the bandage. I stood in the kitchen long after her car pulled away, staring at the coffee maker she'd forgotten to turn off that morning, the red light glowing accusatory in the dimming afternoon light. I had 48 hours before the kids came home from their weekend with my parents. 48 hours to decide what I was going to tell Emma and Tyler, how much a 10-year-old and 7-year-old needed to know about their mother's choices. 48 hours to figure out if I was going to follow through on my threat to report Philip Grayson to every authority I could find. That last part, at least, wasn't really a question. Sunday morning, I sat at my laptop with a legal pad and started making lists. It's what I do when the world stops making sense. Reduce chaos to bullet points, problems to solvable equations. The engineer's defense mechanism. Authorities to contact. North Carolina Medical Board, State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, Better Business Bureau, FBI, Fraud Hotline, Local Police, Fraud Division. I started with the Medical Board. Their website had a complaint form that asked for detailed information about unlicensed medical practice. I filled it out methodically, including everything I knew: the strip mall address, Philip Grayson's name, probably fake, I noted, the Carolina Professional Institute branding, the promise of an accelerated medical degree. I attached photos I'd taken on my phone during the orientation, the folding tables, the generic anatomy posters, the printed curriculum that promised to turn sales representatives and insurance adjusters into doctors in 18 months. The Attorney General's office had a similar form. Then the FBI. Each one required me to reconstruct the fraud, to see it again through official eyes. The tuition structure, $2,400 per month for 18 months. Total cost $43,200 for a credential that legitimate medical schools spent 4 years and $250,000 creating. The fake accreditation claims. The targeting of working professionals who wanted career advancement without the inconvenience of actual medical training. By noon, I'd submitted 4 separate complaints. My phone rang while I was drafting an email to the Better Business Bureau. Unknown number. Charlotte area code. Mr. Whitmore? A woman's voice, professional and careful. Speaking. This is Detective Amy Carlson with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Fraud Division. We received your complaint this morning through the state AG's office. They flagged it as urgent and forwarded it to us. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I had all the time in the world. Detective Carlson asked me to walk through everything from the beginning. I told her about Rebecca's supposed medical school, about my investigation, about the confrontation at the orientation. She listened without interrupting, and I could hear her typing in the background. Mr. Whitmore, how many other people were at this orientation? I tried to remember. Maybe 15, 20? Do you remember any names? I thought back to the nervous woman who'd asked about clinical rotations, the older man excited about career change. No, we didn't really introduce ourselves before everything fell apart. That's fine. We'll work with what we have. More typing. I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Did your wife ever mention that Philip Grayson claimed to be a licensed physician? The question landed like a stone in still water. She said he was a doctor, that he was teaching the program. Did he ever treat anyone medically? Prescribe medications, diagnose conditions, anything like that? Not that I know of. Why? Detective Carlson's voice took on a harder edge. Because if he represented himself as a licensed physician and provided medical services, that's not just fraud. It's criminal impersonation of a healthcare provider. Class I felony in North Carolina. We've been looking for someone matching Philip Grayson's description for about 3 months now. The coffee I'd been drinking turned sour in my stomach. You know him? We know of someone operating a similar scheme in Raleigh earlier this year. Called himself Dr. Michael Preston there. Took about $60,000 from 12 people before disappearing. We could never locate him. No real address, burner phones, cash transactions. If this is the same person, you just gave us our first solid lead in months. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Rebecca paid him $4,800. That you know of, Detective Carlson said quietly. Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to need to interview your wife. Is she available? We're separated, as of yesterday. She's staying with a friend. A pause. I see. Do you have contact information for her? I gave her Rebecca's cell number, the name of her friend Jessica, who she'd mentioned when she left. Detective Carlson thanked me and said someone would be in touch soon, that they'd be sending officers to the strip mall location to secure any evidence before Grayson could clear it out. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. 3 months. Grayson had been running this con for at least 3 months before Rebecca met him. How many people had he scammed? How much money had he stolen while promising desperate, ambitious people a shortcut to legitimacy? And Rebecca? God, Rebecca. Had she really been that blind? Or had she known, somewhere deep down, that it was too good to be true and simply chosen not to look too closely? My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Jessica says police called her looking for me. What did you do? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, I reported the fraud. Like I said I would. Detective Carlson wants to talk to you. You should call her. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. You're really doing this? You really lied about having a medical degree and used it to get promoted, I wrote back. What did you think was going to happen? No response. I spent the rest of Sunday in a strange limbo, waiting for something to happen. The house was too quiet. I cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, organized the garage, fixed a loose board on the back deck. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spinning through the same useless loops. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I'd never done that before, not when I wasn't actually ill, but I couldn't imagine sitting in my office pretending to care about load calculations and stress tests while my marriage collapsed and my wife faced potential criminal charges. At 10:30, my phone rang again. Detective Carlson. Mr. Whitmore, I wanted to update you. We executed a search warrant at the strip mall location this morning. The office was cleared out, completely empty except for some furniture. But the landlord had security camera footage from the weekend. My heart kicked up. And? We have clear images of a man matching Philip Grayson's description removing boxes and equipment Saturday night around 11 p.m. He made 3 trips, drove a white Ford Transit van, no plates visible. We're running the footage through facial recognition now. So he's gone. From that location, yes. But Mr. Whitmore, we also found something interesting. The landlord said Grayson paid cash for 3 months' rent back in August. But when we checked with the strip mall management company, they had no record of anyone named Philip Grayson. The lease was under a business name, Advanced Medical Education Services, LLC. Let me guess, I said. The LLC doesn't exist. Oh, it exists. Registered in Delaware 3 years ago. But the registered agent is a corporate services company that handles thousands of shell corporations. We're working with Delaware authorities to trace the actual owners. But these things are designed to be opaque. 3 years. Grayson hadn't just been running this con for 3 months. He'd been planning it for years. The scale of it made me dizzy. There's one more thing, Detective Carlson continued. I spoke with your wife this morning. She's cooperating with the investigation, and she's agreed to provide us with all her communications with Grayson, texts, emails, everything. Mr. Whitmore, did you know she met him on LinkedIn? I hadn't known that. I hadn't asked. He reached out to her first, the detective said. Targeted message about advancing her medical sales career with proper credentials. Very professional, very convincing. We're going through her message history now, and it looks like he spent weeks building trust before ever mentioning the program. A con within a con. Grayson hadn't just created a fake school, he'd actively recruited marks, researched them, tailored his approach. Rebecca hadn't stumbled into this. She'd been hunted. It didn't excuse what she'd done with the fake credential, but it complicated the picture I'd been carrying in my head, the one where she was simply reckless and dishonest. We'll be in touch as the investigation develops, Detective Carlson said. In the meantime, if you think of anything else, any detail your wife mentioned, anything you noticed during the orientation, please call me. I promised I would. After we hung up, I sat in the too quiet house and thought about Rebecca's LinkedIn profile, about Philip Grayson scrolling through pharmaceutical sales representatives, looking for the ambitious ones, the hungry ones, the ones who wanted more but couldn't afford the time or money for legitimate advancement. My wife had been a mark, and I'd been collateral damage. The kids were coming home in 6 hours, and I still didn't know what I was going to tell them. The children came home at 5:30, their voices carrying through the front door before they even opened it. I'd spent the last 2 hours preparing myself for this moment, rehearsing explanations that sounded reasonable, trying to find words that wouldn't shatter their world completely. But when Emma burst through the door with her backpack trailing behind her and Tyler followed close on her heels arguing about who got to choose the TV show, all my carefully constructed speeches evaporated. "Dad, where's Mom?" Emma asked, dropping her backpack in the middle of the hallway. "Her car's not here." I'd known this question was coming, had dreaded it with every fiber of my being. "She's staying at Grandma's for a few days," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "We thought it would give us all a little space." Tyler looked up from where he was already digging through the pantry. "Is she mad at us?" God, the innocence in that question nearly broke me. "No, buddy, not at all. Mom and I just need to work through some grown-up stuff." Emma's eyes narrowed. She'd always been the perceptive one, reading between the lines with an accuracy that sometimes frightened me. "Are you getting divorced?" The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're trying to figure things out." She nodded slowly, processing this information with a maturity that 10-year-olds shouldn't need to possess. Tyler had already moved on, apparently satisfied with my explanation, but Emma lingered in the doorway watching me with those dark eyes so much like her mother's. "Can I call her?" she asked quietly. "Of course. Anytime you want." She disappeared upstairs with her phone, and I heard the soft murmur of her voice through the ceiling. I wondered what Rebecca would tell her. Whether she'd maintain the fiction about Grandma's house or whether she'd start building her own narrative of events. I wondered if I cared anymore. My phone buzzed. Detective Carlson. "Can you come to the station tomorrow morning?" 9 a.m. We've got some developments. I texted back confirmation, then stared at the screen for a long moment. Developments. The word could mean anything. Maybe they'd found Grayson. Maybe they'd uncovered more victims. Maybe the whole thing was about to get worse before it got better. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's fraud division occupied the 3rd floor of a nondescript government building off East Trade Street. I'd called in sick to work, the first time I'd done so in 3 years, and driven downtown through Monday morning traffic that moved like congealed gravy. Detective Carlson met me in the lobby, her expression professionally neutral. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Whitmore. We've made some progress I wanted to discuss with you in person." She led me to a small conference room where a younger man in a rumpled suit was studying a laptop screen. He looked up as we entered, offering a brief nod. "This is Agent David Kowalski from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit," Carlson said. "They've taken an interest in the Grayson case." Federal involvement. I felt something tighten in my chest, whether relief or dread I couldn't quite tell. Kowalski turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a driver's license photo of a man I recognized immediately as Philip Grayson, though the name beneath the photo read Trevor James Hutchins. 38 years old, Kowalski said, his voice carrying a faint Midwestern flatness. Originally from Columbus, Ohio. He's been running various educational and medical credential scams for the better part of a decade. We've connected him to at least 4 similar operations in 6 different states. "How many victims?" I asked. "We're still counting. Conservative estimate? North of 200 people over the past 8 years. Total financial damages somewhere around $3 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca was just one of hundreds. One small piece in an elaborate machine designed to exploit ambition and desperation in equal measure. The Delaware LLC was a shell, Carlson added. Registered to a mail forwarding service. But we got lucky. Hutchins got sloppy in Charlotte. He used his real credit card to pay for the strip mall lease. That's how we confirmed his identity." "Where is he now?" I asked. Kowalski and Carlson exchanged a glance. "We don't know yet," Kowalski admitted. "But we've frozen his known bank accounts and issued warrants in 3 states. He's also on the FBI's wanted list for wire fraud, mail fraud, and impersonating a medical professional. It's only a matter of time." I should have felt satisfaction at this news. Instead, I just felt hollow. What about the people he scammed? Do they get their money back? "Probably not," Kowalski said bluntly. "Most of it's been moved offshore or spent. We might recover some assets when we catch him, but victims should expect pennies on the dollar at best." $5,000. Rebecca had paid $5,000 for a worthless piece of paper and whatever fantasy Hutchins had sold her alongside it. Money we'd saved for Emma's orthodontist appointments and Tyler's soccer league fees. "There's something else," Carlson said carefully. "We've been in contact with your wife's employer, Meridian Pharmaceuticals." My stomach dropped. "And?" "They're conducting an internal investigation. Apparently, the promotion your wife received was contingent on her having completed certain continuing education requirements. The fake credential from Carolina Professional Institute was part of her application package. So she'll lose her job." "That's between her and her employer," Carlson said. "But yes, that seems likely. There's also the question of whether she knowingly submitted fraudulent credentials or whether she genuinely believed the program was legitimate." "Does it matter?" I asked. "Legally, yes. Intent matters. If she truly believed Hutchins was running a legitimate accelerated program, that's different from knowingly submitting false credentials. One's a victim of fraud, the other's potentially criminal." I thought about Rebecca's face during our confrontation in the strip mall parking lot. The way she'd insisted she'd thought it was real, that Grayson had seemed so professional. Had that been truth or self-preservation? Did I even know my wife well enough anymore to tell the difference? "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We'll need you to testify when we catch Hutchins," Kowalski said. "Your enrollment in the fake program, the confrontation, everything you observed. Your wife will likely need to testify as well." "She won't like that." "She doesn't have much choice," Carlson said, not unkindly. "She's a victim and potentially a witness to fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office will want her cooperation." I left the police station 40 minutes later with a folder full of paperwork and a head full of information I didn't want. The morning had turned cold, October asserting itself with wind that cut through my jacket. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, staring at nothing. My phone rang. Rebecca. I almost didn't answer. But some stubborn part of me, the part that had loved her for 12 years, that had built a life with her, couldn't quite let it go to voicemail. Daniel. Her voice sounded raw, like she'd been crying. Emma told me you said we're working through things. Are we? Is there any chance? The FBI's involved now, I said, cutting her off. They've identified Grayson. His real name is Trevor Hutchins. He's wanted in multiple states for running these scams. Silence on the other end. Then, oh God. Meridian's investigating you. The police say you'll probably lose your job. I know. They called me in this morning. Put me on administrative leave pending their investigation. Her voice cracked. Daniel, I swear I didn't know it was fake. I thought, what did you think, Rebecca? That you could buy a medical degree from a strip mall? That there's some secret shortcut the rest of the world doesn't know about? I thought it was an accelerated program for working professionals. Grayson showed me accreditation documents, testimonials from other students. He had a whole website, professional materials. It looked real. Because you wanted it to be real, I said quietly. You wanted it so badly you didn't ask the questions you should have asked. I know. She was crying now, soft, desperate sounds that once would have broken my heart. I know I messed up. I know I've destroyed everything. But Daniel, please. The kids need both of us. We can get through this. I watched a young couple walk past my car, holding hands, laughing about something. They looked so unburdened, so blissfully unaware of how quickly everything could fall apart. I don't know if we can, I said finally. I don't know if I want to. I hung up before she could respond, then sat there in the cold garage, wondering when exactly I'd stopped recognizing my own life. The call from Detective Carlson came 3 weeks after Rebecca moved out, on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing structural calculations for a shopping center expansion in Concord. Emma and Tyler had finally stopped asking every day when Mom was coming home, a small mercy that felt more like defeat than progress. Mr. Whitmore, we've located Trevor Hutchins, Carlson said without preamble. Picked him up yesterday afternoon at a motel outside Asheville. He was using the name Dr. Richard Brennan and had already begun recruiting students for another accelerated medical program. I set down my coffee mug, watching the surface ripple from the tremor in my hand. That was fast. He got sloppy, used the same bank account to rent the motel room, one we'd already flagged. The manager recognized him from the news coverage and called it in. She paused, and I heard papers shuffling. He's being arraigned Thursday morning. I wanted to give you advance notice because your wife's name is going to come up during the proceedings. Rebecca's cooperating with you, isn't she? She is, but the district attorney's office is still determining whether to file charges against her. That decision depends partly on what Hutchins says and partly on what we find in his records. Another pause. There's something else you should know. We recovered his laptop and financial records. Your wife wasn't the only one he was personally involved with. The words landed like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected as much. Even though I'd spent 3 weeks telling myself our marriage was over regardless. The confirmation still hurt. God help me, it still hurt. How many? I asked. At least 4 other women over the past 3 years. All enrolled in his programs, all married, all working in medical-adjacent fields. He had a type. Carlson's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry. I know this doesn't make it easier. She was wrong about that. Somehow, knowing Rebecca had been one victim among many, one mark in a practiced con, made it marginally less personal. Not better, exactly. Just different. A scam rather than a love affair. A transaction rather than a betrayal of the heart. Though the lies were still lies. The deception still deception. What happens next? I asked. Hutchins will likely plead not guilty at arraignment. His public defender will argue for bail, which the DA will oppose given his flight risk and multi-state warrant situation. Then we move toward trial, probably 4 to 6 months out. She cleared her throat. Your wife will need to testify. So will you, most likely. The prosecution wants to establish the full scope of the operation. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing the structural diagrams displayed there. 4 other women. 4 other families imploded by Trevor Hutchins' elaborate performance. I wondered if their husbands had discovered the truth the way I had, or if they'd been blindsided by police investigations and news coverage. I wondered if any of those marriages had survived. I wondered if I wanted mine to. Rebecca called that evening, after I'd fed the kids and supervised homework, and read Tyler 2 chapters of the fantasy novel he'd become obsessed with. Her voice sounded hollow, flattened by exhaustion or resignation or both. "The detective called you," she said. It wasn't a question. "This morning. I wanted to tell you myself, before you heard it from them." A long exhale. "There were others, Daniel." He showed me pictures of his medical degree, his residency certificate, letters of recommendation from Johns Hopkins. He had business cards, a medical license number, everything. And I believed him because I wanted to believe I'd found something real. I gripped the phone tighter, standing in my kitchen, where we'd shared 1,000 ordinary meals, where she'd kissed me goodbye on countless mornings, her lips tasting of coffee and mint toothpaste, before heading off to meetings that were real and appointments that weren't. "Something real," I repeated. "You were married, Rebecca. You had something real." "I know." Her voice cracked. "I know that now. But at the time, I felt like I was disappearing, like I was just Emma and Tyler's mother, just your wife, just another sales rep pushing statins and blood pressure medication. The medical program felt like reclaiming myself, and Trevor..." She stopped. "He made me feel seen. Special. Like I was capable of more than I'd settled for." The anger that surged through me was clean and sharp, cutting through weeks of confused grief. "You think I made you settle? You think our life together was something you had to escape from?" "No. Yes. I don't know anymore." She was crying now, quiet sobs that I could picture accompanied by her hand pressed against her mouth, the way she always cried when she didn't want to be heard. "I'm trying to be honest with you. You deserve honesty, even if it's ugly. What I deserved was a wife who talked to me when she felt unfulfilled instead of enrolling in a fake medical school and screwing a con artist." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't apologize for them. Couldn't. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we'd failed to say during 12 years together. All the small resentments left to fester, all the conversations avoided, all the ways we'd chosen comfort over truth until truth became impossible. "Meridian fired me," Rebecca said finally. "Officially, as of yesterday. They're considering legal action for the falsified credentials I submitted. My lawyer thinks they won't pursue it if I agree not to sue for wrongful termination, but..." She trailed off. "I'm going to lose my license to practice pharmaceutical sales. Even if criminal charges don't stick, the professional consequences are permanent." I should have felt vindicated. Some part of me had wanted exactly this. Wanted her to face concrete consequences for the choices she'd made, the lies she'd told. But standing in our kitchen, listening to her career crumble in real time, I felt only a distant, weary sadness. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. My lawyer says I should cooperate fully with the prosecution, testify against Trevor, show remorse and acknowledge I was deceived. If I do that, there's a chance the DA won't file charges." A bitter laugh. "Funny how the truth becomes strategy when your freedom depends on it." "Is it the truth? Were you actually deceived, or did you know the program was fraudulent and not care because it gave you cover?" The question I'd been avoiding for 3 weeks, finally spoken aloud. The question that would determine whether I could ever look at her again without seeing a stranger. "I didn't know," Rebecca said quietly. "I swear to you, Daniel, I believed it was real. The accreditation documents looked legitimate. The curriculum seemed rigorous. Other students had the same questions I did about the compressed timeline. But Trevor always had explanations that made sense. She drew a shaky breath. But did I want to believe it so badly that I ignored warning signs? Did I let myself be deceived because the alternative meant admitting I was having an affair and destroying our family for nothing? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Probably. Yes, I think probably I did. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months, maybe years. And it changed nothing about the fundamental fact that our marriage existed now only as wreckage to be sorted through, damage to be assessed, legal documents to be filed. The kids ask about you, I said, because I couldn't navigate the conversation we were actually having. Emma wants to know if you're coming to her recital next month. Tyler made you a card at school, but won't let me mail it because he wants to give it to you in person. Can I see them? The desperation in her voice was raw, unguarded. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but they're my children too. I need to see them, Daniel. Please. I thought about Emma's carefully neutral expression when she'd asked if Mommy was sick, the way Tyler had started sleeping with his old stuffed elephant again. I thought about the therapist I'd scheduled appointments with for both of them, the delicate conversations about how sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and families change shape. Saturday afternoon, I said. 2 hours supervised. We can meet at the park on Hernandez. Thank you. She was crying again, harder now. Thank you. I'll be there. I promise I'll... Don't make promises, Rebecca. Just show up. I ended the call before she could respond, before the conversation could spiral into territory I wasn't ready to explore. 4 other women. A pattern of seduction and manipulation spanning years. A con so elaborate it had fooled police and licensing boards, and 200 desperate people seeking credentials they'd never earn. And my wife, who'd wanted so badly to be special that she'd believed a stranger in a strip mall could transform her into a doctor. Looking back now, I can see how we'd both failed each other in small, accumulating ways. How I'd stopped really seeing her somewhere along the way, stopped asking what she needed beyond the logistics of shared life. How she'd stopped believing I could understand her ambitions, her frustrations, her hunger for something more than the ordinary contentment we'd built. But understanding the path that led us here doesn't change where we've arrived. Doesn't make the betrayal hurt less, or the lies forgivable, or the future any less uncertain. Thursday morning, Trevor Hutchins would stand before a judge and plead not guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and impersonating a medical professional. Rebecca would sit in the courtroom, another victim-turned-witness in the case against him. And I would stay home with our children, trying to explain why their mother couldn't tuck them in at night anymore, why our family looked different now, why sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagined possible. The truth, I've learned, doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just shows you exactly how trapped you've been all along. The weeks that followed Rebecca's departure moved in a strange, disjointed rhythm. Days that felt simultaneously endless and compressed, like time itself had become unreliable. I'd wake at 5:47 a.m. without an alarm, the house too quiet, and lie there listening to the absence of her breathing beside me. Then suddenly, it would be noon, and I'd realize I'd spent 6 hours staring at engineering drawings without processing a single line. Emma asked about her mother exactly once, on a Tuesday evening while I was burning grilled cheese sandwiches. Is Mom coming back? I turned off the stove, scraped blackened bread into the trash, started over with fresh slices while my daughter waited, patient in the way children learn to be when adults have already disappointed them. I don't know, sweetheart. Your mom and I are figuring some things out. Okay. She went back to her homework. That was it. No tears, no tantrum. Just okay. Tyler hadn't asked at all, which somehow felt worse. Rebecca had moved into a furnished apartment near South End, one of those corporate housing complexes where people land temporarily between one life and the next. We'd established a custody arrangement through lawyers. Mine was a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Brennan, who'd listened to my story with the weary expression of someone who'd heard variations on this theme too many times. Rebecca saw the kids every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. She picked them up promptly, returned them on time, and we exchanged maybe 20 words per transaction. Did they eat? Spaghetti at 6. Tyler needs his permission slip signed. It's in his folder. Conversations stripped down to pure logistics, the emotional content evacuated. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with something that might have been regret or might have been exhaustion. I'd stopped being able to read her face, or maybe I'd never been able to and was only now admitting it. The criminal case against Trevor James Hutchins was building momentum. Detective Carlson called me every week or so with updates, her voice carrying that particular blend of professional detachment and genuine anger that seemed to characterize every law enforcement officer who'd worked this case. We've identified 217 victims across 6 states, she told me in mid-November. Total damages approaching $4 million. The federal prosecutor is throwing the book at him. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, practicing medicine without a license, identity theft. He's looking at 20 years minimum. And Rebecca? A pause. The DA is still deciding. She's cooperating fully, which counts for something. But she did submit fraudulent credentials to her employer, claimed to have completed coursework that didn't exist. That's a crime in North Carolina, obtaining property by false pretenses. If Meridian decides to push for charges, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I'd found the documents in Rebecca's home office the week after she moved out, while boxing up her belongings. A manila folder tucked in the back of her filing cabinet, behind tax returns and insurance policies. Inside, a certificate from Carolina Professional Institute declaring her completion of Advanced Medical Practice Fundamentals, signed with Hutchins' flowing signature. A transcript listing courses she'd supposedly taken: Pharmacology 2, Clinical Assessment, Diagnostic Procedures. All fiction. All printed on expensive cardstock with an embossed seal that looked official enough to fool who? Her employer? Herself? There was also a letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery. I'd read the first line. My dearest Rebecca, what we're building together. Before folding it back up and shoving it in the box. I didn't want to know. Whatever lies he'd told her, whatever fantasy he'd constructed, I couldn't stomach the details. Patricia Brennan had photocopied everything, naturally. Discovery, she'd said. If this goes to divorce court, we'll need documentation of the fraud, the financial losses, everything. If this goes to divorce court. We hadn't filed yet. Weren't legally separated, just separated. Living in this liminal space where we were still married on paper but strangers in practice. I knew I should make a decision, file or reconcile, one or the other, but I seemed to have lost the capacity for decisive action. I went to work. I fed my children. I walked biscuit around the neighborhood. I existed. Thanksgiving arrived with the inevitability of all calendar obligations. Rebecca had the kids that year. We'd agreed to alternate holidays, another item checked off the list of things broken families negotiate. I spent the day at my brother's house in Greensboro, making conversation with relatives who'd heard vague details about marital difficulties and were polite enough not to pry. My sister-in-law, Julie, cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my coffee. You look terrible, she said, which was the kind of blunt assessment I'd always appreciated about her. Thanks. I'm serious, Daniel. You've lost weight. When's the last time you slept through the night? I couldn't remember. I'm fine. You're not fine. No one in your situation would be fine. She handed me a business card. Dr. Louise Keller, licensed clinical psychologist. My friend from book club. She specializes in trauma and betrayal. Just think about it. I pocketed the card and didn't think about it, not consciously. But I found myself calling the number 2 weeks later, during my lunch break, sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a Panera Bread. Dr. Keller had an opening the following Tuesday at 4 p.m. I took it. The therapy office was in one of those converted houses near Myers Park, the kind with a discreet sign and a waiting room that tried too hard to feel calming. Watercolor landscapes, a white noise machine, magazines about mindfulness. Dr. Keller turned out to be a woman in her mid-50s with gray hair cut short and direct brown eyes that assessed me in the first 30 seconds. "Tell me what brought you here," she said, once we'd settled into chairs that faced each other at a careful angle. I told her. The whole thing. Rebecca's supposed medical school, the strip mall, the confrontation, Hutchins' arrest, the separation. It took 40 minutes, and when I finished, my throat was raw. Dr. Keller made a note on her pad. "How are you sleeping?" "Not great." "Eating?" "When I remember." "Suicidal thoughts?" "No." The answer came quickly, firmly. Whatever else I'd lost, I hadn't lost that. "I have kids. I wouldn't." She nodded. Depression often follows this kind of betrayal trauma. You've had your reality fundamentally altered. The person you thought you knew turned out to be someone different. That's not just grief. It's a kind of identity crisis. Identity crisis. The term felt too clinical for the howling emptiness that opened up some nights when I lay in bed and tried to remember who I'd been before all this. Before the discovery. Before I'd enrolled in that fake medical program and walked into that strip mall classroom and watched my wife's face transform from confidence to horror. "I keep wondering what I missed," I said. "What signs I ignored. Was I that blind, or was she that good at hiding it?" "Maybe both," Dr. Keller said. "People are complicated. We contain multitudes, show different faces to different people. Your wife might have been genuinely deceiving you while simultaneously deceiving herself. That's not very comforting." "No," she agreed. "But it's true. The question isn't whether you missed signs. The question is what you do now with the information you have." What I did now. As if I had any idea. As if the path forward was clear, instead of obscured by fog and doubt, and the persistent, nagging question of whether any of what Rebecca and I had built together had been real. The trial date was set for March. Federal court, downtown Charlotte. Agent Kowalski had called to let me know I'd be subpoenaed as a witness. My enrollment in the program, my documentation of the fake school, my testimony about Rebecca's claims. I'd be there anyway, I told him. I wanted to see Hutchins face justice. What I didn't say, I wanted to see the man who'd blown up my life. Wanted to look him in the eye and understand what kind of person builds an empire on lies, who seduces vulnerable people with promises of credentials and advancement, and whatever else he'd offered Rebecca in those handwritten letters I refused to read. December came. The kids made paper snowflakes at school. I put up Christmas lights because that's what you did, what was expected, what maintained the illusion of normalcy. Rebecca and I met in Patricia Brennan's office to discuss holiday custody. We sat on opposite sides of a conference table, lawyers flanking us like seconds at a duel. Christmas Eve with Rebecca, Christmas Day with Daniel, Patricia said, reading from her notes. Then reverse it next year. Does that work for everyone? Rebecca nodded. I nodded. We signed papers, stood to leave. Daniel. Rebecca's voice stopped me at the door. I turned. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Dark circles under her eyes that even makeup couldn't quite hide. I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. I wanted to say something cutting. Something that would hurt her the way I'd been hurt. But standing there in that sterile conference room with our lawyers pretending not to listen, all I felt was tired. I know, I said. And I left. The trial began on March 12th, a Tuesday that dawned gray and cold, winter refusing to release its grip on Charlotte. I sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse watching Trevor James Hutchins enter in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, looking smaller and more ordinary than the figure I'd built up in my mind. No polished suit today, no confident stride, just a middle-aged man who'd run out of places to run. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. 217 victims, $4 million in fraud, bank records showing money flowing through shell corporations and offshore accounts, testimony from a woman in Raleigh who'd believed Hutchins when he said he could certify her as a physician's assistant in 18 months, a man from Greensboro who'd paid $30,000 for a surgical residency that consisted of watching YouTube videos. Rebecca testified on day 3. I watched her take the oath, her hand trembling slightly on the Bible. She wore a navy suit I didn't recognize, her hair pulled back severely, no jewelry except her wedding ring. I wondered if she'd worn it deliberately, a signal to the jury that she was a wife, a mother, someone who'd made a mistake but wasn't a criminal. The prosecutor walked her through the timeline. The LinkedIn message from Hutchins, the promises of an accelerated program, the tuition payments, the fake credentials she'd submitted to Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Did you know the program was fraudulent when you enrolled? The prosecutor asked. No. Rebecca's voice was steady, but I could hear the strain beneath it. I believed it was legitimate. Mr. Hutchins showed me accreditation documents, business licenses, testimonials from other students. Everything looked professional. When did you realize it wasn't legitimate? When my husband confronted me at the orientation. She glanced toward the gallery, her eyes finding mine for just a moment. He'd done research I should have done, asked questions I should have asked. The defense attorney cross-examined her aggressively, trying to paint her as a willing participant in the fraud. Had she researched the accreditation agencies Hutchins claimed to be certified by? Had she verified his medical credentials? Had she questioned why legitimate medical schools took 4 years while his program promised results in 18 months? I trusted him, Rebecca said, her voice finally breaking. I wanted to believe I'd found something real, and that made me vulnerable to deception. I take full responsibility for my lack of due diligence, but I didn't know I was participating in fraud. I testified the following day, walked the jury through my investigation, my enrollment in the program, the confrontation at the strip mall. The prosecutor entered my photographs into evidence, the folding tables, the generic anatomy posters, the fake curriculum promising to turn sales representatives into doctors. Hutchins's defense attorney tried to suggest I'd entrapped his client, that my enrollment was a setup designed to manufacture evidence. I kept my voice level, factual. I enrolled because my wife claimed to be attending medical school there. I wanted to understand what she was involved in. What I found was fraud. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Hutchins showed no reaction when the verdict was read, just stared straight ahead with the blank expression of someone who'd known this was coming. Sentencing was scheduled for May. The federal prosecutor told reporters outside the courthouse that she'd be seeking the maximum, 25 years. I drove home in silence, the radio off, processing what closure was supposed to feel like. Rebecca had texted me, "Thank you for testifying, for telling the truth." I didn't respond. The divorce papers arrived in April, delivered by a process server while I was helping Tyler with his math homework. Patricia Brennan had filed on my behalf, citing irreconcilable differences rather than adultery or fraud. Cleaner that way, she'd explained, less contentious, better for the kids. Rebecca didn't contest it. We'd already worked out the custody arrangement, joint legal custody, primary physical custody with me, alternating weekends and holidays for her. The house would be sold, proceeds split equally. Retirement accounts divided. She'd keep her car, I'd keep mine. Everything reduced to assets and liabilities, checked boxes on legal forms. The district attorney had ultimately decided not to file criminal charges against Rebecca. Her cooperation with the Hutchins prosecution, combined with clear evidence that she'd been deceived, had tipped the scales toward treating her as a victim rather than a perpetrator. But Meridian Pharmaceuticals had filed a civil suit, seeking to recover the salary and bonuses she'd received under false pretenses. That case was still pending. We met one last time before the divorce was finalized, at a coffee shop neither of us had any history with. Neutral ground. She looked better than she had at the trial. Some color back in her face, less of that haunted exhaustion. She'd found work as a sales associate at a medical supply company, she told me. Entry level, nothing glamorous, but honest work. I've been seeing a therapist, she said, stirring sugar into coffee she wouldn't drink. Trying to understand how I got here. Why I was so willing to believe Hutchins, to ignore the warning signs. Have you figured it out? She smiled sadly. I think I was trying to become someone impressive enough that you'd notice me again. Somewhere along the way, we stopped really seeing each other. You were busy with work, I was busy with the kids and my job, and we just existed alongside each other instead of with each other. There was truth in that. Painful truth. But it didn't excuse what she'd done. I noticed you, I said quietly. Maybe not the way you needed, but I noticed. I know, and I'm not blaming you. This was my choice, my failure. She finally met my eyes. I destroyed something good because I thought I needed to be extraordinary when being ordinary with you was enough. Should have been enough. We sat in silence for a moment, mourning what we'd lost and what we'd never really had. The kids are doing okay, I offered. Emma's therapist says she's processing things well. Tyler still has nightmares sometimes, but they're getting less frequent. I know. They tell me things when I see them. She blinked back tears. I hate that I did this to them, that my choices hurt them. They'll be okay. Kids are resilient. I hoped it was true. Will you be okay? She asked. I thought about Dr. Keller's office, the slow work of rebuilding trust in my own judgment. The quiet evenings with my children, learning to be enough for them. The engineering projects that still absorbed me, problems with clear solutions and reliable mathematics. Eventually, I said. Yeah, I think so. We finished our coffee, signed the final papers her lawyer had brought, shook hands like business associates concluding a transaction, which I suppose we were. I watched her walk to her car, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, and felt something release in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not closure. Just acceptance that this was how our story ended. Not with drama or grand gestures, but with paperwork and divided assets and the quiet acknowledgement that we'd both failed each other in ways that couldn't be repaired. Trevor James Hutchins was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. He'd be eligible for parole in 18, assuming good behavior. The judge's statement was scathing. You preyed upon people's legitimate aspirations for advancement and turned their ambitions into profit. You damaged careers, destroyed families, and undermined public trust in educational institutions. The harm you've caused extends far beyond the financial. I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd said everything I needed to say in my testimony. Hutchins was someone else's problem now. Emma graduated from 5th grade that June. Rebecca and I sat on opposite sides of the auditorium, polite when we crossed paths, focused on our daughter's accomplishment. Tyler finished 2nd grade and announced he wanted to be an astronaut, which seemed as reasonable as any other ambition. I sold the house in July. Too many memories, too many rooms that echoed with the life we'd built and dismantled. I bought a smaller place in Ballantyne, closer to the kids' school, with a yard big enough for Biscuit and a home office where I could work in peace. The money from Rebecca's half of the house sale went towards settling the civil suit with Meridian. She'd be paying them back for years, but at least it kept her out of bankruptcy. We'd stopped discussing finances, stopped discussing much of anything beyond the logistics of co-parenting. Some Saturday mornings, I'd watch her pull up to collect the kids and remember the woman who'd scrunched her nose at crossword puzzles, who'd hummed while folding laundry. That woman seemed like someone I'd known in another life. Maybe she was. Dr. Keller asked me once if I'd ever trust anyone again, after what Rebecca had done. I don't know, I'd answered honestly. But I'm learning to trust myself again, to trust my judgment, my instincts. That seems like a good place to start. She'd nodded. It is. If there's a moral to this story, I suppose it's this. You can never truly know another person, not completely. We all contain depths we hide even from ourselves, capacities for both nobility and deception that surprise us when circumstances demand their revelation. Rebecca wasn't a villain, and I wasn't a hero. We were just two imperfect people who'd built a life on assumptions that couldn't withstand the weight of reality. The betrayal taught me that trust without awareness is just willful blindness. That love requires not just commitment, but continued attention, curiosity about who your partner is becoming, not just who they were when you met them. That the small failures of connection, the conversations not had, the questions not asked, the emotional distance accepted as normal, can accumulate into chasms that seem uncrossable. But it also taught me that I was stronger than I'd known, that I could survive having my world dismantled and still show up for my children. That engineering principles, structural integrity, load-bearing capacity, the mathematics of stress and strain, applied to human resilience too. We bend before we break. And sometimes, in the bending, we discover new shapes we're capable of taking. Emma asks me sometimes if I'm lonely. I tell her I'm not, which is mostly true. I have my work, my children, my dog, friends I've reconnected with after years of benign neglect. I have a life that's smaller than the one I'd planned but more honest, built on foundations I've tested and verified myself. Rebecca is dating someone I've heard through mutual acquaintances. A teacher, divorced, with kids of his own. I hope he makes her happy. I hope she's learned something from the wreckage of what we had. I hope she's found whatever it was she was searching for in that strip mall classroom, though I suspect the search itself was always the point. As for me, I'm learning to be content with ordinary. With the reliable mathematics of my profession, the predictable chaos of raising children, the simple pleasure of a dog who thinks every day is the best day of his life. I'm learning that extraordinary isn't always better. That ambition without ethics is just greed. That shortcuts usually lead you somewhere you never intended to go. Trevor Hutchins offered people a fantasy, credentials without effort, expertise without training, transformation without change. Rebecca bought that fantasy because she wanted to believe in magic. But real growth is slower, harder, built on honest work and incremental progress. Real love is messier, more complicated, requiring the kind of sustained attention we'd both failed to give. I don't know if I'll marry again. Don't know if I'll ever be willing to make myself that vulnerable, to trust someone with the kind of totality I'd trusted Rebecca. But I'm not closing the door on possibility. Just approaching it more carefully, with questions prepared and eyes open. The kids will be okay. I'll be okay. Rebecca will probably be okay too in time. And somewhere in a federal prison, Trevor James Hutchins is learning that every con eventually runs out of marks, every lie eventually meets the truth, and the shortcuts we take to avoid hard work just lead us to harder consequences. That's not justice exactly, but it's something close enough. I still drive past that strip mall sometimes, on my way to job sites in South Charlotte. The space that housed Carolina Professional Institute is a yoga studio now, offering transformative wellness experiences to people seeking their own versions of reinvention. I wonder if they're legitimate or just another con with better marketing. I wonder if it matters, as long as people find what they're looking for. But I don't stop to check. I've learned my lesson about investigating promises that sound too good to be true. I just keep driving, toward whatever comes next, trusting the road beneath my wheels and the mathematics that keep bridges standing, and the slow, honest work of building a life that doesn't require deception to sustain it. That's enough. It has to be.